So this is Cheetah 3D. It's a fairly simple 3D rendering program. It's probably the simplest one in my opinion out there. It's the one I chose to start learning with after first jumping into Blender and finding it a little bit intimidating as somebody who's never done 3D rendering before. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I learned as I started. Let's get started by doing something super simple, about the simplest you can do. We're just going to create a word. You go up here where you see this large T and select text. And what it does, it places kind of at the origin spot here, at the where 000 X, Y, and Z axis meet, it places the word text for you. And by holding the Option key while you click the mouse and move around, you can see you have a 3D space to work with here. It's very cool to play around with. But with this one command, you've already started working in 3D space, and it's you'll see it's fun to work with. So now I've got, you see here, this is my object pane in the lower right of the screen where I've got highlighted text here. I've got two objects in it right now. I've got the camera, which you can't see because we are looking through the camera at the moment, and the text item that we created. What we want to do next is actually give some 3D shape and depth to the word text. We're going to put in what's called an extrude. You can see that popped up here in the lower right object pane. We're going to drag the text onto the extrude, and you can see suddenly you've got a 3D shape. And we're going to be doing quick renders throughout the tutorial here to show you how things come together. The render button is this camera up here in the top bar. I'm going to click on the camera, and you see it renders my image for me. It renders it pretty small. By default, it's going to start rendering at 640 by 480. That's no good. I'm going to make it kind of a widescreen image for now, just to give us a little bit more detail when we do these renders. I click on camera, and by just hitting the key R, it brings up the key renderer settings here. And again, don't worry about all these other things you see. It can be overwhelming if you try to figure out everything at once. We're not going to worry about everything. We're going to change the resolution in the top line. I'm going to change it to 1920 by 1080 for now. When we do a full-size image that's good for uploading to the agencies later, we're going to go much larger. But for now, just testing our renders, I'm going to do just kind of a widescreen image. I'm going to zoom in and do another render. So now you can see here was the first one, very small. Now we've got 1920 by 1080. You're going to see as we do testing over time, more renders, this is going to get more and more detailed and more interesting. So let's start by putting in a word here that is something that we could see a buyer at the agencies wanting to download. I'm going to type the word success. I'm going to make it all uppercase. If I spell it correctly, that helps. And then I can make it fit on the screen here. I can either zoom out with the camera to make it fit, or I can make the word smaller so it fits in the size of my workspace I've got. If I want to make the word smaller, I could either work with the text outline itself and scale it down here by grabbing these boxes on our tool. This is the transform tool, it's called. We can drag this box that makes it smaller along the x-axis. This box makes it smaller along the y-axis. So that works. What we could also have done is size all the axes down at once. I'm going to undo these changes I just made to show you if you wanted to just change all the axes values at once. Click on one of the boxes and then click on the circle. Hold down while you're clicking on the circle, and it scales the whole thing down at once. Trying to add depth while you're in the text outline object is simply not going to work because the text outline is just along two planes. It's just on X and Y. It doesn't have depth. That's why we have the extrude. So if you wanted to make it wider or less wide, or give it more depth or less depth, you could slide it there by working with the extrude item. Okay, so that seems about good, but I want to change the font. I'm not crazy about this font. See, if you highlight the text item, or simply by clicking on the object here, So you see the red outline that tells you you've got the text highlighted. You can go up here under font and choose another font you like. I happen to like a font called Good Pro. I'm going to go with that. So now I've got a font I like. I've got it. It's got 3D shape. We're going to start doing some more interesting things with it. So the renders we did before really had very basic lighting, the default camera lighting for Cheetah 3D. Now I'm going to show you how to add some more interesting lighting through shadows. That's using something called Radiosity. You click on Camera, and you go down. You can get back to the render settings by clicking R. And now you can see Radiosity is an option. It's unchecked. I'm going to check it and do another render and show you the difference this makes. It's a huge difference. So now you see we have this nice shadowing through the letters. This was very flat and just not realistic at all. Now you've got some nice realism going on. It's starting to look like something. What I'd like to do now is add a floor underneath the word. And to do that, we would go and check on this box. It's basically adding a polygon object or a shape to the scene. And I go down to plane. Now you can see it put the plane at the origin, where all the zeros are on the XYZ axis. And I can move it around by using the arrow keys. That just slides it along one of the axes. And then I want to make it give it more depth. I want to make it wider here. And now if I render this, it looks like it's kind of intersecting here. I want to make it a little bit lower so the word doesn't intersect with the floor. Render it again. And now you see it's casting a nice shadow on the floor. So every step we do, everything we do, it's nice to do a render to see what difference it made. What I'd like to do now is get rid of the black background. I'd like this to have a white background. That's very easy to do. Again, going back to the camera, slide down here to where it says background. It shows you, by default, Cheetah 3D gives you a black background. I want to change that to white. So I clicked on it. I get this color wheel, basically. And you can do it a couple ways. You can move the mouse around the color wheel. But if you're trying to get right on the exact white spot, it's very difficult to do just manually. So you grab the slider, you can bring it all the way to the left. That gives you white. And then doing another render. You see, now I've got a white background, but it's showing me that the floor I have is gray. I'd like that to be white as well. So I am going to add a material. This is something we haven't done yet, but very simple to do. You click Add Material in the lower left. I'm going to simply add a material. And by default, it gives us this kind of light gray color. I click on it. I want to name this floor, just to tell myself later if I get mixed up, if I have too many materials, what is what. I'm going to call this floor. And now I can edit the color of this by having it highlighted, going up here in the upper right now, where it says Diffuse. Click on that, gives me the color wheel again, and I can decide what color I want that material to be. You can see I can, again, click on the wheel here, pick something, or if I know I want it exactly white, I can just use my slider, go all the way to the left. Actually give me something a little bit green. If you go up, it gives you different choices here, formulas for choosing the color. There's another way to do it. Click on the white pencil here. Now we know we've got solid white. I can drag that onto the floor, and we'll see what difference that makes. So now you can see we've got almost perfect white on the floor and in the background, but it's not quite the same. We can go back into the image, go back to our camera, make sure we've got the same white we're using there. And now we've got, you can see a little bit of gray, a little bit of difference, and that's because the edges of the floor, it's catching some of the shadow from the words. So if you broaden out the floor a little bit more, do another render, now you really don't see the edges like you did on this one. So you can see this is a lot of trial and error, but a lot of fun to work with. As you can see, it's very interesting moving it around. You can create a little bit more drama by zooming in, going on different angles. Let's render that, see how that looks. Now, we want to make it more interesting. We don't just want a gray word here on a white floor. Let's put some color onto the word. Let's create a new material. Highlight it. Let's just call it Word. Click it once and go up here under Diffuse. Now we can choose one of these colors. We can go to the color wheel if we want to be a little more creative. Let's choose like a nice bright blue color. Also use the slider here. Okay. And the way to add color is to just drag. You can either drag it right onto the object, or you can drag it way over here, put it onto the extrude. It's usually less work to just kind of drag it up onto the object. And let's render it out, see how it looks as blue. So it's starting to look a little more interesting. And as you can see, very simple, very easy to work with, not intimidating at all. Just take everything one step at a time. Don't worry about learning all the tools at once. Just learn what you need. But let's add a little bit of reflection to it. How you do that is you go down and select your material. Now we're going to learn one more item up in the pane in the upper right, and that's reflection. You can check this box. Right now it's showing you reflection, showing you black, which basically means 0% reflection. If it was totally white, it would be 100% reflection. And you can get there by sliding the slider bar. 100% reflection is basically a mirror. There's no color in it at all, and it shows you we don't want that. We just want a little bit of reflection. So about here would be about 25%. Maybe let's slide up to 30, 40%. Close the color window. And it's already applied it because the color is on the word. So if we render it, we should see that there's now a reflection there. As you can see, it's reflecting the floor. It's also reflecting from one letter to another. You can compare in your renders, see what a difference it made. I'd like to try something else. Sometimes when it is just hard edge letters, it doesn't look very realistic. I'm really going for some photorealism here. Things in the real world just don't have a perfect sharp edge to them. They typically have a little bit of a bevel around the edge. Even if something is meant to be kind of hard and defined, the edges aren't perfectly 90 degrees along all the edges. So what we do to correct that, go on to our extrude, and now we can add a bevel. We're learning one more item up in the upper right. For type, I'm going to select round or convex. And as you can see, it adds this edge, this beveled edge all the way around it, which is way more than I need. I'm going to take this way down. Right now it's 0.05. I'm going to make it 0.005. Maybe I want a little bit more than that, maybe 0.015. Okay, maybe too much. You can see a lot of this is just kind of trial and error. So I like that. It gives it just a little bit of a beveled edge around it, but it's kind of just a flat, like 45-degree angle now, which still is not very realistic. So how you can fix that, make it a little bit more of a nice rounded edge, is up on here under Properties. Move it up a couple notches here from 1 to 2. You can see now the beveled edge is getting a little smoothed out. You don't want to go too crazy with this because what it does, it creates a lot more calculations for the program to do, and when you do your renders, it makes it take a lot more time, believe it or not. Something as simple as this, you don't want to add too many sections to your bevel. That will just increase rendering time. So I'm going to make it 4. Seems like a happy medium. Also, adding the bevel made this kind of intersect with the plane a bit, I think. So I'm going to grab the plane and lower it just a hair. and let's do a render. So I love adding bevels to things. It really gives it more of a smooth look, more realistic. Let's play with the angle again. Let's make it kind of straight. Render that out. You can just have trial and error to figure out what kind of angle you like. Now, maybe I'm not crazy about the blue. It doesn't scream success to me. Colors are important. You want to make sure you're putting thought into what color you're putting on objects you're creating. What color is going to jump out the most to the buyer and scream, look at me, this color matches the concept you're going for. I want to go with gold for this word success because gold kind of symbolizes success to a lot of people, financial, wealth. So you can get gold. Cheetah gives you by default a gold if you go to material and select metal, and it gives you a different palette of colors you can choose from, different metal types. I can choose gold. And now you see my palette here is really building out here with different options for me. I'm going to throw gold right onto the word success, render it out, see what I get. So very strange looking. You get this black reflection on the top of the letters. Now what we want to do here is give it an actual reflective surroundings to cast a reflection onto the word. And you do that, we're going to learn one more item here. Choosing your camera. Going up on the camera icon here, you can select that and choose HDRI light. And click it, and by default it gives you an image. Cheetah has some sample HDR images that can serve as reflective surfaces for the things that you create. Now you can go in and learn more about creating HDR images and load up your own to create some unique surfaces that you want reflected on your images. But for now, we'll just go ahead and use the default one that Cheetah gives us and do a render with this. You can see the difference it makes. Suddenly it's looking more and more realistic. What I'd like to do here is get rid of this background. By default, when you turn on an HDRI image, it actually puts that image in the background as well, which we don't want. So by unchecking this box, it will take it out of the background. All right, starting to look a little better and better. Now, what I don't like here is you can see the distortion around here. This is because the floor, the white floor, is casting reflection onto the image. And when we put the bevel on, that all those calculations going around the curves creates this weird distorted effect. We can get rid of that by just having the floor not reflect on the letters. For the floor, which we've still called plane, we can actually change the name of it to floor, so it's easy to remember what this is. Double click and type the word on it. Actually do that here for the extrude. We can call that success. Once you start having a number of extrudes in your workspace, having them named out here could help you remember which ones they are as you want to go and manipulate them. Let's highlight the floor. And if we don't want that to show up in the reflection, that's easy to turn off by going up, clicking on this little man-shaped image here. And we want to choose the render item. And that's going to give us some choices in terms of what we can control. So for the floor, we do not want it to be visible in reflections. So we uncheck that and render again. Now you can see what happened here. The floor is suddenly not showing up in the reflection. Now only our image is, and you can see what a difference that makes. Now this probably is not the best HDRI light to be using for this word, so we turn it off, we get that. And you can see it's black because there's simply nothing to be reflected in the word. So we need something. We either need a better HDRI image or we need the floor to be reflecting, but you can see what happened when we had the floor reflecting. It was giving us that weird distortion because we had the bevel on. So I'm going to put a new HDRI image in here. I'm going to load up something different I have. I've created my own HDRI images to give me better results when I do these renders. But it still gives me that distortion. A way to fix that would be to go into the extrude here You can see it's giving you a smooth angle of 30. If we play with this number here, they make it 5. Render it again. It takes away that distortion. So again, this is a lot of trial and error, but it made a big difference there. The one thing I don't like is the fact that, we had the white background before, and now with our HDRI image, it's giving us this weird kind of grayish because the floor is absorbing some of that HDRI light. There's a way to fix that as well. We just want a floor that's simply going to give us a shadow. We don't want a floor that's going to have all these other properties that absorb the HDRI light and give us that color. So there's another material you can go with for the floor instead. So we're going to go to Add Material, Special, and it's something called a Shadowmat. What this is when you want a material that's simply there to cast a shadow. You don't want it to have all the other properties and effects that go along with a normal material. So if I drop this on here, you can see it looks kind of black, but wait till you see what happens when it renders. What we can do is go up to the white point for the shadow mat, make sure that's selected. It's right now by default 1.0, change it to 0.5. This scales back the color of it, and when you do another render, now simply you have the shadow on the floor. So much better. I'm not crazy now about this gold. I think it's a little too extreme. I'm going to make my own gold. Show you how to do that. Go to Choose New Material. I'm going to call this New Gold. That's not quite as totally reflective as the old gold. I think it's a little too extreme. So I'm going to start by making a color that's kind of like yellowish orange and adding a reflection to it. The reflection have a little bit of a yellow tint to it. And then make sure I throw the material onto the word and render that. So you can see the difference here. Now I'm a little bit more in control of how much reflection there is. It's starting to look a little bit more like real gold, in my opinion. When you have that more control, then maybe make it a little shinier, a little more yellow. Make the reflection a little more bright. Go render it again. And again, more trial and error here. This is just playing around. This is the fun of doing 3D rendering, is doing some experimentation, see what you like. So we are now at about a place where you actually have an image that you could upload to the agencies. It's very simplistic. You might want to add a little more detail to it, put other objects around it, but you've created a 3D render here in just a few minutes that is now marketable. And you can upload, you put your keywords to it. If you've got a good business concept here that is high commercial value, let's say this one is ready to upload to an agency. You want to make sure that you're rendering it at a good size. Go back to your camera, click R to bring up your renderer settings. And I think a good setting for good resolution setting for the agencies, maybe 4500 by, let's say, 2500. And then you can zoom in a bit. Again, just having it flat like this isn't maybe all that visually interesting. You could add a little more drama by changing the angle. But just by playing around, you can get it perfect so you think it's something that the agencies will accept and you think customers will really notice and meet their needs. And once you got it perfect, it's good to do a final render and process and upload and see how well it does. Now, what was a game changer for me and could be a game changer for you is now taking what you've learned in Cheetah 3D here, or Blender if you're using Blender to do the same things, integrating 3D objects into your photography. And that's simple to do, and that's where things get really exciting here. So I'm going to add a plane to the image. And you can see it kind of put it off to the side here. I'm going to put it in the background. You want to have it roughly at a 90-degree angle. You can do that manually here by clicking on the bar in the transform tool along the edge that lets you rotate. Or you can see here how the number is changing along the y-axis up in the upper right. You change that, go in there and type 90, you know you got exactly 90-degree angle. Then you can move it back Slide it back. You want to take basically the entire background. I'm stretching it this way, stretching it up this way. So now you've got a plane to put a background image to. So one of your photos, you could actually integrate the word success into a photo where it makes sense for you. So you want to bring your photo in here, go to add material, and load up an image by clicking this item here, textures, image. Clicking load. Now I'm selecting image of a table. It brings it in as the material. You can see the table image shows up here in the background. I'm dragging and dropping it onto the background. And now you can see my word happens to be positioned on the table here. Might be a little too tall. I'm going to make it a little smaller. And do a render to see how this looks. Before I render, I want to make the resolution smaller so the render doesn't take forever. Let's go back to 1920 by 1080 and do a test render here. Now you see I've integrated this 3D word into the photo. It looks like I've actually got 3D objects sitting inside my photography. It makes it really interesting. You can see how the shadows here are stopping before the edge of the table. We could fix that by stretching the box, stretching the plane here to kind of go basically off the screen. You can see that the plane with the shadow is still kind of stopping back here. That's because the plane of the background image is intersecting, not allowing us to push the box back further, so we can simply move the plane back further. It's hard to do. I want to push it along the Z-axis, and because of the angle I'm working with in the camera mode, it's hard for me to grab it and slide it back. So another good thing to do is be shifting between camera and perspective. I kind of like where my camera is right now. I don't want to mess with it, but I do want to be able to manipulate things along the Z-plane. So if I shift to perspective, now I can move things around. You can see actually there's my camera as an object. Now we're no longer looking through the camera. We can slide around, get a look at our scene. The box, again, a lot of trial and error here. Let's see how this looks. So a little bit better, but now the word success is kind of lifting off the table, and I can just change the angle of that as well by highlighting it, moving it down angle-wise, and then lowering it. And again, trial and error to get it to be just what you want. Now, of course, there's a lot more to 3D rendering than just working with text. There's a whole world of modeling that opens up once you start playing around with the tools, and I'll just give you a little glimpse of that. Let's hide the word success here, and I do that by these little icons here. The eyeball basically lets you see it in the scene, so you can do some editing. The movie icon here, you can't see it making a change here, but that determines whether it's going to show up in your render. So turning that off so it's gray, turning off the eyeball. It's basically disappeared from the scene, even though it's still there. You can always turn it back on at any time. But what I want to show you is how to do some simple modeling and just kind of scratching the surface there. I'm going to start by making a simple shape. What I'd like to do is create an award that could be sitting on this work conference table. I'm going to create a star. You can see it again, puts it at the origin here. We're going to move it in just a moment, but I'm going to add some extrude to it, drop the star outline onto it. I want it to actually look like a 5-point star. I'm going to slide it over here. You can change the number of points you want on the star. Right now it's 6. You could do something crazy and go with 11. There's an 11-point star. What I really want here is a 5-point star. And it's a little bit chunky of a star. I want it to be a little less chunky, so you can do that by looking at the radius. You can go to the radius inner. I'm going to change that to 0.13. That's a little bit too thin. Let's do 0.23. That's about right. So I want to make it gold. I want to make it look like an award that's sitting on the table. Nice gold award. So it's gold now. Create a box. Now we've got a box that's sitting here way too big and way to the left, so we're sliding it over, making it smaller, clicking on the circle here. Let's have it short, so just wide enough for the star to be sitting on it. Having it sitting above the table just a little bit here. Bring the star down. Yeah, there's probably better ways to do this, but I'm just quickly showing you fast and easy way. Kind of do it by eyeball here. Make it a little bit wider. And let's give that a material. Let's give that base. I think maybe like a nice marble would work. Let's create a new material. Go up here, textures, image, load. Got a nice marble image here, I know. Drop that on there. And do a quick render, see what we like it. So it's starting to look like a little bit of an award sitting there on the desk. Again, very simplistic rendering here, but you can see as you add more and more detail to it, it starts to look a little more real. What I want to do is group these two items together, and I can do that by grabbing each one of them. Anything I want to group together, highlight them both, and then do right click and do group. It puts them together, but also what it does is that it has the group set. The point transform tool shows up at the origin, so I can click on transform here, slide it over. Now when I go to manipulate it, and I do that, I check this box here that lets me manipulate the 3D shape. I can rotate it a bit, do another render. You can see what a difference just rotating it a bit makes. It gives it more depth. Go back and forth with my renders here. I like it more on an angle. You can see it looks like it's sitting unnaturally on the table here, so I'm going to turn it on an angle here, lower it a little bit, maybe move it back. I think the other thing I'd like to do is put some words on the award, as if this was a award to a top performer. And I'm going to go ahead and create a word here again, clicking on text. Maybe we just say, make it something simple. Let's say winner. And again, I like, you probably have your favorite fonts. One of my favorites is called Good Pro that I used earlier. This word is giant, but we're going to size it down. I'm going to put an extrude in here again. Drag that text outline onto the extrude. Drag the little transform tool, click on the box, then the circle. Makes the word smaller. And then just kind of move it around. I want to move the extrude around, so I'm going to lift that up here, slide it around. Now the smarter thing to do would have been to create this object while all the different pieces were at the origin, while they're not all at different angles here, trying to match up. So this is really not the way a professional would do it, but sometimes it's fine just to kind of eyeball it, get it so you feel it works. Sizing the word down here. Up and then rotating it so it's a little more kind of level inside of the star. And I want to make it white. And it just so happens the first material we created, floor, was a nice white color. So I'm going to just grab that, drop it on the word winner, and let's see how it looks in a render. What we could do to make that the word stand out a little bit more, make the word winner just a little bit smaller. I'm going to duplicate it. You can have extrude highlighted, do a Command C, Command V. On the duplicate version, put a little bit of a bevel to it, just a tiny bevel, and put our gold color on that, and then move it just a little back, and do a render and see what difference this makes. So now the word winner stands out a little bit more. And I think we could make it stand out even more by going back, changing the emissive again to even brighter white. Do another render. Yeah, it's looking better and better with each tweak I make. You can see this is where we started. Let's go right back to the very beginning of the award. And as we did some rendering and some moving it around, got a little bit better with each change we made. I want to lift it a little bit off the table. So I would probably play with it a little more just to make sure I'm getting it just the right height off the table. But you can see you're starting to get some photorealism here. We're just doing some very simple things in Cheetah 3D, and we're really just scratching the surface. So I hope you're really excited by this. I hope you see it as a game changer. It was really a game changer for me when I discovered it and started playing around, integrating these things into my portfolio and getting a lot of sales from it. So jump into this. Let me know what you think of this idea. So really, we have just scratched the surface today looking at 3D illustrations using Cheetah 3D, but the next step would be looking at animations, going the next step further, taking your still photos, adding 3D elements to it, and turning them into videos. If you've never done videos before, this opens up a whole new world for you. Look how this takes the image that was flat, makes it look like a 3D environment, adding the word success and doing a real nice animation with it, something that could really drive more sales for you in Microstock, open up a whole new world for you. So if you are interested in how to do this, how to do some animations in Cheetah 3D, let me know in the comments and we'll keep doing more tutorials. Until then, we'll see you soon.